Welcome in, everybody. Glad as always that you are along. It's our year-end special. We've been doing this every year, the last several, and that is kind of a compilation of some of my favorite interviews from the year and kind of give you a snippet of each of those. We'll get to the four we picked out in a little bit. Happy to be joined by my middle son, Zach, who's kind of a regular on this program, a broadcaster in his own right down in Amarillo with the Sod Poodles, AA affiliate of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Zach, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and an early Happy New Year.
Oh, thanks, Dad. It took you a second to remember the Diamondbacks part. I've been doing this for a couple of years now. You'd think you'd be right off the top of your brain, but
they're the enemy, man. They're the enemy.
I guess I am the enemy in that sense. But doing well. Obviously, I've been spending a lot of time with you the last couple of weeks. So take that how you will. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not so great. You never know.
I won't comment on that. No, it's fun. It's been good having your two other brothers in town as well. Hey, big thanks very quickly to longstanding sponsors, SteelUSA.com. That's where you go shopping, and Huntington Bank. You can go shopping for perhaps a new banker at HuntingtonBank.com. So we want to do something in addition this year to leading you to the four interviews that we've kind of selected for this year, looking back on what's been a fun year. But as we look back, I thought it'd be neat to kind of discuss biggest surprises, biggest moments, maybe biggest disappointments, locally, regionally, and nationally, and some of the things that come to mind. I have to be honest, Zach, you're much better about this than I am. I do a game and I lose everything that happened during the game typically when I look back a year later, 6 months later, sometimes even the next morning. You're better than I am at kind of recollecting stuff. So I'll start with this. Your favorite moment that immediately comes to mind from 2025.
Oh, wow. I didn't know I was going to have to choose the favorite one, so I had to consider that for a moment. As an Avalanche, a big Avalanche fan, as you know, and I've talked about that on the podcast before, Gabe Landeskog coming back. I know the series didn't end up the way that we all wanted, and that certainly hurt. But when he came back in Game 3, that was unbelievable, and then eventually scoring the goal as well. And just the whole lead up to it as well, with the documentary coming out 3 years away from the game. It's one of the most remarkable comebacks, not just in Colorado sports history, but sports history. The fact that he was out of the game for 3 years, rehabbing this knee injury. And as we've seen so far in this 2025-2026 campaign, just his presence in the room was so dearly missed. And it's equated into a lot of wins this year. But to have the captain back was so awesome. And I've been candid about this with you oftentimes. He's my favorite athlete, I think, ever. Just the way that he did, his demeanor on and off the ice, but especially the way he backs his teammates. He's a heck of a player, obviously, as well. But he stands up for his team, and the fact that he was the youngest captain at 19 years old, the faith that people had in him is the reason that I love him so much. And obviously, that faith from the Avalanche has paid dividends across his tenure there, and it's great to have him back. So I think that's the one moment, I guess, that would stand out to me. But there was a lot of great moments here.
Yeah, I'm going to concur with you in that I think Gabriel Landeskog, he's just different. He's special. You did a nice job discussing all the reasons why you arrive at that. But everyone thought he was done. I mean, initially he thought he was going to come back, but 3 years later, nobody comes back 3 years later. And then even more remarkable to me is that this year he's back, but I figured, okay, back-to-back games, you're not going to see him. They would limit the ice time. He has played not only every single game, but his ice time keeps increasing. Lately, he's skating with the first line. And the Denver Post, before I say the Denver Post did a nice piece the other day trying to determine who was the key or maybe unsung key as to why the Avalanche are off to this historic start. And Gabriel got mentioned quite a bit. And I would say this. I think he's as great as McKinnon is, he's playing better than anybody in the world. As great as Cale Makar is, the best defenseman in the world. I think it has to do with Gabriel Landeskog, the professionalism that he has, and therefore there's no letdown on a night-to-night basis, and that's why they're able to win at this crazy pace. Because even that game against Vegas the other night, they're down a couple of goals. All right, we had to fly in the morning of the game. It's after the Christmas holiday. We're not going to win this one. No big deal. We still have the best record in hockey. No, they were relentless and ultimately did win in a shootout.
And not only that, that's a Vegas team where you could hear some of their media say that was one of the best games they've played all year. Speaking of the Golden Knights, and the Avalanche just kept hanging in there, down 2-0, down 4-2, down 5-4 with 4 minutes left when Vegas scores that goal, and they come back and tie it and eventually win it in a dreaded shootout, which they never do. It's been a special team. And Eric Johnson, which has been awesome watching him on the altitude telecast, and he's going to be on ESPN next year. He was made to be a color analyst on television. He's going to do an excellent job. But him talking, because he's been in that room with both of those guys. He's won a Stanley Cup, speaking of McKinnon and Makar. He won a Stanley Cup with those guys, and he says the way that Landy's able to mesh two very different personalities. And he talked about Nate, and everybody knows Nate. He's a workhorse. He's intense all the time. And then the word, I believe, that Eric Johnson used for him, for Cale Makar, was like a little nerdy kid or whatever. I think that's what he described. So I don't want to be wrong, and if I am, I apologize. But it was something along those lines where it's like he's able to mesh those two guys, those two superstars, and they're pushing for a common goal. And as great as McKinnon is, and as great as Makar has been, I think you're right that Landeskog deserves a lot of credit to the way this team has played so far this year.
Biggest surprise locally in sports, nationally in sports this year?
Biggest surprise. Oof. I'm gonna throw. Give me a second to think about this. What do you have on that in that department?
I would say to a certain degree the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos went to the playoffs last year. They lost in Buffalo, as we all know. I think most people thought, maybe they'll take another half step, hopefully be a playoff team again. I saw a lot of the people who follow the team very closely thought, 10 wins, maybe 11 wins. I saw some people who thought maybe it was a 9-8 type of team. And they're going to be the top seed in the AFC. I believe that. They have a legitimate shot to go to the Super Bowl and win it. I don't think there's a great team in the NFL this year. They've found a way to win all the close games, seemingly. Bo Nix has what great athletes have, the ability to push delete. If you have a shitty play, you move on. He also has what I think the great ones do, and I'm not saying he's a great one yet, but he's got the moxie and the want to that has enabled him to win in the fourth quarter when they're down. So locally, for me, the biggest surprise is not that we thought the Broncos were going to be a 4-win team. They're not my New York Giants, but I think the jump that they've taken and put themselves now in a realistic conversation to be the last one standing, I'm going to give the Broncos their flowers.
I like that, and that actually brings up a different. You brought up one of the moments from this year that I was going to bring up, and that's with the Broncos. Like you said, I think everybody saw them as a playoff team, the number 1 seed that they have the possibility of going out and getting next week. And we just learned today Justin Herbert's not going to play for the Chargers, so if they take care of business, the road's coming through Mile High. And we talked about this the last time I was on, and it's not some crazy take at all that. The Broncos got to win 2 home games if they're able to handle business against a Herbertless Chargers next week. They got to win 2 home games to make it to the Super Bowl, and then once you're in, who knows? So this could be a really special. We're talking about the great moments for 2025. Man, in 2026, with the way the Avs and the Nuggets and the Broncos are playing, we could be really reminiscing on some good times at this point next year. But one of the biggest games I thought of this year was maybe the mile-high meltdown of the New York Giants that you were at that game as well. But 33 points in the fourth quarter, down 19-0. I think that's, even though the Giants have not had a successful season by by any measure, and they made it even worse by winning on Sunday against the Raiders. I think that game in particular definitely stands out. They've played a lot of great games this year. The win in Philadelphia, the way I thought their best win was against Green Bay a couple weeks ago, just the way they played throughout that game. But the fourth quarter came along, you scored 33 points and come away with the victory down 19. That's a really special game for the Broncos.
Yeah, I'm excited about the postseason. I'm really excited about the postseason. Do you have a favorite moment from the Nuggets this past year?
Well, so you know what? I started thinking about what the most surprising thing was for me, and I do have a Nuggets one as well. But I think it would be the Michael Malone firing right before the playoffs, and then the way that the Nuggets actually performed really well. And you hear the Thunder, who they had such a stupendously good team last year, and they're maybe even better this year, which is certainly scary. But they afterwards, all their players like, yeah, the Nuggets, we could barely get by them. They were right there with Adelman at helm, and the way that Jokic played. But one of the big moments, a couple different buzzer beaters from Aaron Gordon, but specifically the one I think of was Game 4 against the Clippers, where Jokic had that step back fadeaway three. It was a little long, and Gordon catches it and flushes it through. And they had to review it for a while to see if it came off his hand. You don't see many buzzer-beating dunks, and certainly not in the playoffs in a huge game like that. So I think that moment really stands out. But I think the surprise right before the playoffs with what the Nuggets ended up doing would be my big surprise of the year. And then that moment with the Nuggets, that one definitely stood out.
Michael Malone's a hell of a coach. He was here a long time. It turned out to be the right move. And Adelman has done a good job. They're weathering the storm right now without the aforementioned Aaron Gordon, without Brown being in the lineup, right? And he's been out for a while, and he'll be back at some point in time. But for me,
one of the Cam Johnson as well. So
they're short. Cam Johnson just went down. They've been.
And to bring up that point, that the win they had on Christmas Day without them against the Timberwolves, that was one of the better Nuggets games. Their history a heck of a lot better than I do. You talk about a Christmas Day win against a rival, and you have Nikola Jokic being the second player to ever have a 50, 15, and 15 game. The way that Anthony Edwards hit a ridiculous shot to send it into overtime, but then they're down nine points to start overtime. They come back. That was another great moment. I hadn't thought about that, even though it was last week until just a moment ago.
Yeah, Zach, that would stand up. I know it just happened, but if you look back, that will be one of the great regular season wins. Is one of the great regular season wins in the history of the franchise. It further cemented the otherworldliness of Nikola Jokic. I don't like having MVP conversations 2 months into the season, 3 months into the season. I think it's kind of ridiculous. However, there's no friggin' way in the world that he's not the best player in the world, and he should win his 4th MVP. And so I'm breaking my rule. But that was ridiculous. 56, 16, and 15. Come on, man. Nobody does that. And it even
Jamal
turned
Murray
around.
At 35 as well.
Right. And it even flipped a guy that likes to poke the bear a little bit in Big Perk, right? Big Perk now says, hey, he's the best in the world. So
it's funny. It's him and him and Nick Wright were the two biggest Jokic haters. And they just got to the point where it's like, what can you even talk about? This guy is so unbelievable. You can't hate on him. There's nothing you can say against it.
Yeah, you can. They're missing 3 starters. So I'm glad you brought that one up. I want to mention a couple other things that happened individually this year that got my attention. Lindsey Vonn, this is a recent one. Lindsey Vonn coming back. You know how much I've loved ski racing. Skied my whole life. Used to live in Aspen, covered the World Cup Tour. I have such immense respect. I know it's a niche sport, but we live in Colorado. And Lindsey Vonn at 41 winning a downhill. And now she's going to have a chance at Cortina to medal again potentially as a 41-year-old. She has a bionic knee. I mean, that's crazy shit right there. And also in the same breath, I want to mention Michaela. Michaela just won yesterday again. She's 5 for 5 in the World Cup Tour in slaloms this year. She's going to win in GS again. Think about this. two of the three greatest men or women, two of the three greatest skiers in the history of the sport are not European. And it's a big deal in Europe. The World Cup Tour is a big deal, Zach, in Europe. Two of the three greatest skiers of all time, Michaela Schifrin and Lindsey Vonn, men or women.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to know a ton about the European skiing tour, certainly as much as you do. But I will say when Lindsey Vonn won, I didn't even know, and this is the conversations I've had with people, that she was still skiing, because Lindsey Vonn was skiing when it felt like I was a toddler, right?
Well,
like
she took 5 years off.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's a wow.
You have the Olympics coming up. That'll be exciting to watch, and I know that you'll probably touch up on this as well, because we're going to see best on best in hockey going back this year as well. Such a great moment was the Four Nations Cup that we got to see last February.
See, I took notes. I got my notes here, and the first thing I wrote down, favorite moments from 2025. First thing I wrote down was Four Nations Cup. You and I both love hockey. We love the Avalanche. The Four Nations Cup, and specifically the United States and Canada dancing twice, was unbelievable theater. Unbelievable theater.
We have game one where there was 3 fights in the first minute or whatever it was, and that was great. But the better hockey game was actually the championship game, and you have McDavid scoring the winner for Canada in overtime. Obviously, as Americans, that's not what we wanted to see, but it was cool to see McKinnon score in that game. And I know we're not rooting for Canada. It's weird to root against those guys because you're so used to rooting for them all the time. But it was cool to see those guys perform at that massive stage. But yeah, absolutely. That, especially because they had not had best on best in so long. And so this generation of players had never had the opportunity to be in a setting like that. And it really did not let down at all. It didn't disappoint at all. And I really look forward to we're just a few weeks away from watching some more Olympic hockey.
Yeah, and I'll say this for all Avalanche fans: fingers crossed. I want it to be great. You need McKinnon, McCarr, Lehkonen, whoever's participating, to stay healthy. And
well, this time too is last year we didn't have any Avalanche on the American team. This year we should have Brock Nelson. So at least we'll have him to cheer on as well. He's been, after those first 10 games, he was getting a little bit of heat. I mean, really, the last 25 games, he has been one of the best 2Cs in hockey. So he's been everything that you could have wanted from him when you traded for him last year, really getting inundated with this system now.
Biggest disappointment, what comes to mind? Locally, regionally, nationally, what do you got?
Biggest disappointment to me is that the Dodgers won another World Series. But I mean, if we're being frank, a 119 loss season is certainly not very fun, right? That'd probably be it'd be hard to say it's anything else, especially here in the state of Colorado for this year. But I will also say, as you've spoken on this podcast plenty of times, man, is it exciting to be refreshing, especially the last month or so with this new front office and what the Rockies, it looks like they're on the right track to becoming contenders again, and playoff contenders again. And we know how big baseball is here in Colorado when the Rockies are going. So in terms of this season particularly, yeah, I'd say it's a disappointment, but I really do think the Rockies, as we've talked about, are really going in the right direction.
They are. I'm excited about it. We know it's going to be a process, not going to happen overnight. It's about players on the field, but I am really tickled with what they've done in the front office, how they've expanded it, and really, really well thought of people in the industry are now employed at 20th and Blake. For me, I want to say, yeah, the Dodgers winning again, whatever, but that World Series, in terms of great things that happened in 2025, that was great theater also. And Game 7 was terrific. Everything you could want in a baseball game. And if you're just a fan and didn't have a rooting interest, it was riveting.
It's one of the best World Series, I mean, certainly in my lifetime. And the way that basically every game was a good game as well. It was close throughout the series, and then the superstars that were on the field on both sides, in both dugouts, there were superstars on both sides, and the way that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Performed that entire postseason was so much fun to watch. I know that basically everybody, it felt like, was cheering against the Dodgers, but it's hard to be too upset when the hero is Miguel Rojas, right? And I mean, that's something that we'll be telling our kids about. That, to me, not quite the Kirk Gibson homer, but you're going to look at moments like that moment, Game 7, ninth inning, Miguel Rojas, a guy who doesn't hit very many home runs. He's a defensive guy for them, and he's the one who comes through. That's going to be a highlight that's being shown across the realm of baseball for decades.
Yeah, it's why the game is beautiful. You never know who the hero will be. I mean, Toronto's best player was Ernie Clement. There's not 5 people walking down a street in Toronto probably who could pick Ernie Clement out if he walked by him or was in front of them in line at Starbucks.
They can now,
Clement, right? So
yeah, they can now, though.
They can now. They can now, and they're probably picking up his latte at Starbucks. Biggest disappointment for me, and I'm going to stay regionally here now, and I'm going to ticket 2 teams: University of Colorado in football, Colorado State University in football. They shared something a year ago. They both went to bowl games. Dion's team went 9-4. Jay Norvell, who's been dismissed, his team went, I think ultimately, what was it, 8-4 or 8-5? They lost their bowl game. They got blown out in their bowl game. But the bottom line is they went to bowl games. You thought they were going to build on it, and both teams were among the, especially in Colorado State's case, among the worst teams in college football. CU wasn't much better. Tremendously disappointing. Colorado State now has a new coach in Jim Mora. Colorado, everybody's hit the portal again. So for me, those 2 schools, and it's not an honor, it's not a distinction you want, but they were the most disappointing for me in 2025.
They were extremely disappointing. Absolutely. I mean, Colorado State's a 1-win team if they don't get bailed out by the refs against Northern Colorado. And then how about that? If Northern Colorado would have won that football game, then they'd say, hey, in Greeley, we're the Northern team in Colorado that matters here. We beat you in basketball and in football. And how about that? Well, actually, excuse me. I take that back. I'm sorry. I got it mixed up. Northern Colorado beat CU. Northern Colorado beat Colorado a couple days ago, but then Denver beats Colorado State, which is surprising because both CSU and CU are pretty solid again this year. Speaking of basketball in the state, how about the Colorado State Rams of last year and Nick Clifford? And I mean, they were right there. They were almost made it to the second weekend, which would have been awesome.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments. It looked like they won right before the buzzer and beat a great Maryland team. They were going to go to the Sweet 16, and then who's a Queen makes a great, shot off the glass literally at the buzzer to beat Colorado State. And one of the 4 interviews we selected for our year-end special is with an old friend of mine, Steve Sands, who I got to know when he was at Colorado State, and he always wanted to get into broadcasting. And Steve and I have remained close. He does great work at NBC and the Golf Channel. And so we always talk a lot of golf. But he's from D.C., and as you'll hear in a little bit, Steve, his whole family are Terrapins. And he went to Colorado State, and he was torn watching that game in Maryland and Colorado State. But I'm glad you mentioned that, Zach, because that was a friggin' great college basketball game. Great tournament game.
It was amazing, and they were so good last year. It was so much fun to watch, and obviously wish Nico Medved the best possible in Minnesota. Wish he was still up in Fort Collins, but the culture he built there will hopefully continue. It was funny watching that. You and I talk broadcasting all the time. Obviously, we're in the same industry. And one of the guys that is very likable. And I think that's such a big thing when it comes to being a broadcaster. And he might be the most likable guy. And we both really like him. Scott Van Pelt. He's the best there is almost. And I love watching Scott Van Pelt. But after that game was the only time I'm like, all right, I can't watch SVP because his Terrapins actually finally did something, and of course it's at the expense of us Colorado State fans.
Yeah, and I hope Colorado State can. They've been to the tournament 3 of the last 4 years now under Ali Farakmanash. They can get there again. Rough start in their final year in the Mountain West, getting crushed at Utah State. It's just getting going. Anything else on your list of memorable moments from 2025 before we move on to the 4 interviews?
Well, I know one is one that we both had on our list, and that's the French Open between Sinner and Alcaraz. I know you're a huge tennis guy. Both you and Michelle are huge tennis fans and watched every moment of that. I played a little bit in high school, so it was fun to watch. But that kind of seems like the new Djokovic, Federer, Nadal. Those two going head to head, and 5 sets. The last 2 go 7-6. They're basically all super close, and that was certainly a big one. That definitely stood out.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because Carlos Alcaraz, it was the first time in his career that he'd ever won a 5-setter when he lost the first 2 sets. And you're absolutely right. People are already doing this, but 3 years from now, 5 years from now, it's going to be a legendary rivalry looked upon, Sinner and Alcaraz, because they are truly a cut above. I hope my guy Shelton can get in there. But right now, those 2 guys have separated themselves, and that French Open final was just a classic, And for all those folks that maybe don't follow tennis, especially when you get to the majors, and specifically, the Australians coming up in January, but when you get to the French on the red clay, Roland Garros, and I'm always partial to the U.S. Open because it's in my hometown in New York, but Wimbledon, I mean, those are monumental events as well. And hey, but before I let you go, you had this one, Rory winning it, finally getting a green jacket, right?
Yeah, that was the one that really again. I've said that there was every single year there's going to be great moments in sports, but Rory finally getting, as Jim Nantz said, his masterpiece was certainly special, especially because of the disappointments that he had finishing second to Wyndham Clark, which we like here in Colorado, but back in 2023 at the U.S. Open, but then in 2024 at the U.S. Open, which is the one where he led that tournament for 70 holes. And ended up losing it. So for him to get back, make that big putt at the end, because there was definitely a little bit of pressure there still at the end to make that putt, especially because they go into the playoffs. I mean, man, what a win! That's an all-time golf win for a guy who's he's a legend in the game of golf, and certainly in today's day and age of golf.
Yeah, and he's my I was a Tiger guy like so many others, and I've become a Rory guy. Because I like his personality. I think he's a really honest guy. I think for me, he's very likable. I love how just like Tiger did, he changed his sport and his fitness level, and Rory's that guy also. So yeah.
Is there a better? Not that you're probably an aficionado of knowing all these different golf commercials, but it's one of my favorite sports commercials ever. The one of Rory McIlroy that they played probably almost a decade ago now, where it's the video of him hitting shots and with his grandpa or whatever, his dad, into the dryer, and then he's hitting shots in the rain and keep grinding up, and then eventually the last scene is him and Tiger Woods walking down the fairway after teeing off on the first hole. That's the way obviously the PGA wanted it. It's passing of the torch, but that's the kind of guy Rory is. That's the type of level he's at. I mean, Tiger Woods is second to none, him and Nicklaus, but
yeah,
it was awesome.
There's so many goosebump moments in sports. It's why we like it. I was getting goosebumps when you were kind of recounting the old commercial with Rory.
Last one I do have to, just because it was so great. Final 4 this year, you have the top 4 seeds and they all seemed like they were a cut above everybody else, and they played 3 really tight basketball games. Of course, Florida ends up beating Houston to eventually win it. But that was the Sod Poodles. I'm an Amarillo. Our opener this year was in San Antonio that weekend when the tournament was going on. So Jacob, my older brother, got to drive down. He was still living in Austin, and we got to go downtown and watch the end of the Duke-Houston game that Duke ended up throwing away a little bit. But that was awesome. It was a great sports year. It really was.
Yeah, it was phenomenal sports year. It really was. And there's a chance, and it's not a bad chance, that we have 1, 2, maybe 3 parades in Denver in the first half of the year. That would be something. Hey, buddy, I love you. I appreciate it. Continued success. Now, you stand there, if you mind, because we got to fill this other box. So you can listen as I lead to somebody one of my favorite interviews of the year, because she's one of my favorite people in the world. She's kind of like she's the daughter I never had, if you will. And that's Taylor McGregor. And T-Mac's doing great things at ESPN, still with the Chicago Cubs. And she was on earlier in the year. And I think one of the most difficult jobs in broadcasting, and you're a young broadcaster, is being a sideline reporter. You have to produce yourself. You have to hustle all over the place. You have to, ask questions of coaches on the fly, players after the game when maybe they're getting Gatorade dumped on them. It is not an easy gig. She does it as well as anyone in sports. And, her career is on an unbelievable trajectory. And we'll give you a snippet of an interview from earlier this year with Taylor McGregor.
All right, T-Mac, do you know what city you're in?
Barely. I sometimes have to check my own Google Maps on my phone to confirm, because, this does happen. I wake up and I'm like, where am I? Like, I woke up this morning and where am I? It was a little bit of an odd feeling. It's not the first time that's happened, but, I'm very grateful to have opportunities in different cities all over the country, and I'll never take that for granted.
Do you carry, you have your notes with you and you have your notes in your head, all the preparation you've done, but do you sometimes like as a cheat sheet, because again, you're going 1,000,000 miles an hour and you're going, okay, I got Kenny Dillingham on one side, I got Sarkisian on the other, and then all of a sudden you're at the Gator Bowl, and you got Duke and you got Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and you go, okay, it's like your worst nightmare almost. This is how my brain works. I don't want to call Lane Kiffin Steve Sarkisian because I'm just still 12 hours earlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do have a two deep with me, as you do, when you call play-by-play for a college football game. I have one of those on the sideline. They're a little bit smaller. And for those who are like, what's a two deep? It's just a depth chart. So it has, the starter, the backup at each position, and obviously the head coach. So that always helps just frame my brain of like, okay, where am I? What am I doing? And it just allows you to kind of stay in the moment. But it's funny. I was talking to Joe Tessitore about this, and obviously he's a pro and been doing it a long time. And he was like, the more experience you get, the ability you get to slow the moment down and not let things like that happen, right? Because when you're first starting, and I experienced this for sure, it's like you just let the moment speed up on you, and that's where you can kind of make the mistakes. But if you can just slow it down, it's like we can all live in the moment and just, kind of remember what's going on.
I think, and again, if most people have never done what you do, and I think it is one of the most difficult things in sports broadcasting, in that there's really a finite number of questions you can ask. You have to ask it oftentimes of a coach who wants to be somewhere else, whether it's running off at halftime or right before, you're doing these interviews now right before kickoff, and you want to ask something that's not fluffy. And I know, because I know you so well personally, that is of profound importance to you, not to ask the generic puff type of question. And that's got to take a lot of work and a lot of quick thinking sometimes as well, especially post game.
Without question. And the pre-kick interviews are interesting too, because like I think people would be shocked at how much time we actually spend thinking about those questions, because you're right. You don't want to be generic, but you also don't want to be pointed. You want to be able to give a coach an opportunity to take it where he wants to go and not put words into their mouth. And like, there's just so much that goes into a good interview and eliciting a good response, because ultimately that's my job. It's not necessarily to ask the best question. It's to elicit the best response. And so how can I frame the question to get to that point? So like Katie and I, before the game, I mean, we were like going back and forth. We kind of wanted our questions to build off each other, which is what we ended up doing, where, Texas had played a first round game and then Arizona State had been off for a month. So we were kind of like, all right, why don't we build off of that a little bit? Like, you can ask Texas about having just played, and I'll ask Arizona State about, how do you get back into playing your best football? Because they won the Big 12 and they were one of the hottest teams in the country, but then they had a month off. And so anyways, it really is, there's so much that goes into it that I don't think people understand. And that's the pre-kick interview. The post-game can be really challenging, just especially in those walk-offs where it's, a split second decision of who you're going for or the questions you're going to ask, because the moment just happened. So you're like in the moment trying to think and be on top of, what should I ask here? What's the biggest point to get to? And it's harder than people think, and there's a lot that goes into just forming a good interview.
The last several years have been probably a whirlwind for you. You're still working, most days in the summer for the Cubs and the Marquee Network, and you're doing stuff at MLB Network. But your profile has grown tremendously at ESPN, and specifically in college football. Has that given you kind of the greatest joy with what you're doing currently?
Yeah, without question. And I think you could probably go back to an interview I did with you on your podcast years ago. And I think you asked me, like, what's your goal? And I said I wanted to cover college football games on the biggest stage. And I'm fortunate with the expanded college football playoffs that I've been able to be on the call for playoff games. It's what we all want to do, right? As broadcasters, you want to be in the biggest moments. And I just have felt so grateful that I've been given opportunities to do so. So yes, I've found a ton of joy and satisfaction this past season, especially, and I'm very grateful and looking forward to more moments to come.
Yeah, and you're handling it terrifically well. And you have a mantra. We were talking about this, not on the air, but I want you to repeat something that we were chatting about, how you view the sideline role and what is of extreme importance to you that people see with that role and questions asked and hits given during, the game when they throw to you on the sideline. Talk a little bit about your philosophy.
Yeah, I think the number one thing I would say is I want my content to be good. I want my content to impact the broadcast. I think in a reporter role, it can be easy at times to just want to be heard. And we've all been there. It's a limited role in the sense of the amount of times that you're heard on the air, because you're given maybe, 15, 30-second clips, and maybe the game doesn't lend itself to getting you on the air a lot. And so anyways, and you work really hard, right? Like, as a reporter, I want to say just as hard as a play-by-play and analyst to prepare for this game, and the amount of time I'm on the air is significantly less. But I want the moment that I am on the air to be incredibly impactful. And so I'm just so big on making sure that my content impacts the viewer and gives them an insight into what's going on in the game with relevant, informative, interesting information. And so, we were talking a little bit about the first hits of the game for reporters, and we call them our open hits. And I'm just so big on those need to be full of good information. Like, I don't want to hear that a guy's excited to play in the game. I just don't. Like, give me something, give me a reason to watch the game. I think injury updates in those moments are really key, but also with context. Like, don't just say, John Smith is back today. Well, who's John Smith? And why should I care that John Smith is back today? You know? So, and it's an art. Listen, the sideline role is an art. And I keep bringing up Joe Tess, and it was because I just worked with him recently. But before I worked with him, he was like, listen, I don't care how the information gets on the air. If it's you, if it's me, he's like, I just want it to get on the air. And so I'm really big on, talking to my play-by-play analysts in breaks and saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing. I just want you to know. I just think it's so important that when I am heard from on the sideline, that it's interesting, impactful information, and I'm not on just to be heard, because I think that could be something that reporters can fall victim to, is just wanting to be heard, because we don't get a ton of opportunities to impact the show.
Love T-Mac, and again, so proud of her and all she's doing. And you've gotten to know Taylor through the years. She started with us with the Rockies.
Yeah, she's the best. Doing stats for you guys. She's a very bubbly person. What you see on the air is exactly who she is, and that's why it has translated so well for her. And she's a megastar now. She's been incredible. And as everybody just listened to this interview, I remember listening to it back when it came out. It was really insightful because, as you mentioned, it is tough to do those halftime interviews where the coaches, I want to get to the locker room. I don't really want to say anything. How can you add to the broadcast and not just ask a generic question? And the main thing you want to do is you want to get a non-generic answer out of who you're talking to, and she does that as well as anybody else.
Yeah, she's doing great. She's really good on her feet. She's super bright, and I'll reiterate again, I'm super proud of her. Steve Sands is somebody I'm also, who am I? But I'm proud of Steve, because I knew him when he was in college, and he's been very kind to me. He says, he looked up to me working in Fort Collins as a college kid, and we've stayed in touch, and he's had a fabulous career. Speaking of good on your feet, speaking of being witty, he's a consummate pro, and it's always good to chat with Steve. It's normally about golf, where he, is immersed, but he loves his other sports, and we had a conversation this summer that began with that great game that we alluded to earlier in the tournament between Colorado State and the Maryland Terrapins.
And I didn't know what to do, Drew. And I wanted this to happen. I wanted Maryland to win because Maryland had a chance to win the national championship. Obviously, it didn't, because they ran into Florida. I wanted CSU to win and play well, because I wanted people to realize how great of a program we have, how good the Mountain West is in basketball, how good a coach Nico is on the world stage of the NCAA tournament. And the only thing I didn't want to happen is for someone, either side, to get heartbroken. So we were 2 out of 3. CSU played great and almost won, which would have been amazing. Maryland won the game, which was amazing. But there was heartbreak. So that was the only problem with the finish of that game. But it was a hell of a game, and I cannot believe they were matched up together. And man, you and everyone I know, my sons especially, were like, oh, Dad, what are you doing here? I go, I'm just going to root for a good game, and we certainly got that.
You know what, Steve? I forget shit in a hurry, but honest to goodness, bias aside, because naturally for me, I'm pulling like crazy for Colorado State.
Right.
That had to be one of, if not the best game in the tournament, right?
I thought it was the best game of the whole tournament.
Yeah.
It was amazing, high level. And by the way, the best players rose to the occasion. The game was high level. The offense was strong. The defense was strong. The coaching was outstanding. The crowd was into it. And you know how NCAA tournaments are, Drew. When the underdog CSU starts taking the big bad bully to the mat, the crowd starts tipping in the scale of that lower seed. That's just always how it is. And the game was outstanding. The finish was a joke. And it was really good high level basketball. That's what made me the happiest, is that both teams showed up and both teams played great. I felt horrible for Nico and the kids. That was a brutal finish.
Yeah. Nico's on in Minnesota. I wish him well. You're right. He's a tremendous coach. I think Farak Minash is going to do a really good job
Yeah.
Say that fast a few times.
No.
He's going to do a really good job, though. He's really well thought of, as you know. So
yeah, I think so. And they've got a good program, man. I mean, they've got a good arena, good fan base. You know, in this NIL world, who the hell knows what's going on? But he's got great, a great foundation there to continue to succeed in basketball at CSU. Now we just need the football program to step up.
I want to dive into Rory McIlroy. Come on, man. You got to deal with the media, even the ones you may not like. And yes, we know the Open, just like you do, is a tough test, and it may not seem fair to the great players of the world always. But his behavior kind of bordered, at least for me, on petulant the last several weeks, and it bummed me out because I'm a huge Rory fan. How would you respond to all of that?
I feel the same way. It bums me out too. I think that part of being a professional, Drew, when you're Bud Black and you're going through the first part of this season and you're thinking, geez, how many times do I need to sit here and take it, from the media? That's part of being a professional. That's part of being in the big leagues. And for McIlroy to be one of the faces of the sport, if not the face of the sport, one of the sounding boards of the sport, if not the sounding board for the sport, he's so smart. He's so insightful. He's always been so good. People want to hear from him. And my one thing that I would say, if I had the opportunity to, it's none of my business, and Rory can do whatever he chooses. But I think he's making a mistake not speaking to the media. And there's a distinction here that I think people need to understand, including athletes, Rory and everybody else. Nobody owes the media, Drew, anything. What athletes do owe, who they owe, are their fans and their sponsors. And the media happens to be the conduit between the athlete and those fans and sponsors. So when you are shunning the media and saying, I don't owe you guys anything, well, that's true. And you can shun them if you want. But I think it's a mistake because when you're such a good guy and so insightful and so smart, you just won the Career Grand Slam, you've always been so popular, I don't know if you want to use that equity on not speaking after rounds when you don't play well and only speaking after rounds when you do play well. I think that's a mistake. And I hope that gets rectified pretty soon because I just think it's turned into a pattern, Drew. And I think it's wrong. And I think Rory's better than that.
So, it was fun visiting with Steve, and he's a guy that lives a life that I've been in broadcasting a long time, but it's one of the sports, Zach, that I've never done. I've never done golf, where you arrive literally. I think those guys get to on site Monday or Tuesday, and then on Thursday they're on the air for the whole weekend, and then it's on to the next site, and it's very complicated how a broadcast takes place, and you're bouncing from hole to hole and reporter to reporter and then up to the tower and the main anchors. I find it from a television standpoint fascinating. And Steve has, done every element of that, including being, a reporter, and he has a very close relationship with Tiger, and, learned some insight on Tiger, and being a big fan. It's been, he's been a great guy and a great resource through the years. All right, Zach, this is a guy that you know a little something about because you watch virtually every game of his throughout his career, and that's Charlie Blackmon. And, Charlie came on in his first year as a special assistant and a full-time husband and dad. What's your favorite memory of Chuck?
Oh, wow. That's, again, put me on the spot a little bit. But when I think of Charlie Blackmon as a whole, you really like thinking about the fact that two guys come to mind when you think of career Rockies that had big-time careers. Charlie Blackmon, Todd Helton. You're going to see number 19, I assume, probably, I think, eventually in the rafters someday at Coors Field. So Charlie Blackmon and his entire career, and just the person he was, and the leadoff when he had 100-plus RBIs at the leadoff spot, those great teams in 2017 and 2018. And just his personality, the beard, and who he was certainly instrumental in making the Rockies interesting, despite their broadcaster lacking a bit of talent at times.
Charlie will always be an iconic figure, not only for the Rockies, as you suggested, his number at some point will be retired, but Charlie is an iconic Denver sports figure. And he's also one of the, I think, more fascinating interviews out there because, unlike so many athletes, if you ask them a question, they immediately fire off a response, and oftentimes it's cliched in nature. Not with Charlie. He would pause and listen and give a thoughtful response to all of your questions. So let's pick up a few minutes with post-playing career Charlie Blackmon.
So I have to ask you, I was thinking about this. I missed you down in Scottsdale, but you're now a special assistant. You were down at spring training. The first spring removed from putting on a uniform, not to coach, not to be an advisor, but to swing the baseball bat and get yourself ready to play in the toughest league in the world. What did it feel like?
It was incredibly easy to just not work out and do all the hard things that it takes to be a baseball player. So it was actually pretty easy to adjusting to not playing. And then, even in the off season, you don't feel like you're missing anything until they start putting stuff on TV, right? Or spring training starts, you start hearing about it and seeing about it. And I'm in a pretty good place. I knew I was going to retire, right? And I've retired, and I think it was the right decision. And so I'm just glad to still be involved, to come back and be around the organization and still be around the game.
You seem like, and obviously I got to know you a little bit through the years, but you seem like somebody that's always been measured, and you do a lot of research and a lot of thinking before you make large decisions. So what I'm hearing is, you know what, this was a process, and I'm good with it, and I don't look back, which I think for many former athletes, especially that had great careers like you did, there's that period of time where, man, I feel like maybe I left something still on the table, or I miss being in the clubhouse, or I miss swinging the bat and preparing. But I'm not hearing that.
I mean, I certainly miss the game, miss the guys, miss little pieces and parts of your day, right? Like the smell of the cage, just playing catch, like little things I really miss. But I think if I had some regrets, it would be much harder. And if I thought I could still do it at the level and the length of time that it is required to play, if I thought I could still do it really well, it would make things harder for me. But it's just, the game's so hard. It's getting played so much better. And 162 games plus spring training, it's just a lot. And so I don't have any regrets. I think that helps me be in a place where I can move past that and move into a new role. As a Rockies employee, as a dad, as a functioning member of society. Like, I'm doing pretty well at this point. I think.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed is that guys deal with it differently, or approach retirement differently, and there's not a right way and a wrong way per se, and it's almost universally difficult for baseball players. I think it's, you don't have to be like a big league player to struggle leaving the game. It could be high school, college, minor league. It's really hard for everybody. It's just, I'm just doing it at a more advanced age than most, very lucky in that sense. And most guys, some guys would tell you, like, play as long as you can, even if it means you're not the same player. And for me, what it meant more of was, like, I was going to play it as long as I felt like I could put in the game demanded me to put in, out of respect for the game. I felt like for me to continue to play, I would have had to cut corners, and then it just wouldn't be the same product. I would be kind of like hoping for success rather than knowing that I'm going to have it.
I got to ask you, Charlie, there, maybe of all the professional athletes that I've, covered, been around, um, you had this persona. There's only like two different people, because I would tell people, like, is Charlie looks like the most serious guy on the face of the earth between 1 o'clock and 11 o'clock. I've seen you, and we've done some radio stuff at bars over the years, or just away from the field. There's a totally different Charlie Blackmon. How many fans do you think realize that?
Uh, yeah, it's it's really rare to see both. It's kind of one or the other. Like my best friend's never seen me as baseball Charlie, right? And that's only for my teammates and my people inside the bubble there. Um, and s- and it's kind of like even my close. It's only like the closest of my family like understands it, right? Because usually it's a very rigid line for me. Once I'm baseball Charlie, like if you're on the outside, like you don't get in the inside, right? You have to. It has to be immediate family, and even then, it's like I'm busy, so I think it's something that worked for me. I think uh, it was. I don't think I couldn't just afford to like flip a switch on and off, right? Like I couldn't just decide I was going to be, baseball Charlie, 10 minutes before the game starts. It was, it took me all day to kind of build and build and build. And, even from pretty early in the afternoon when I got to the field, I knew there was a game that night. I only had a certain amount of time to prepare. I wasn't there really earlier than I need to be, but I also wasn't there late missing stuff. So if I was there, it was because I've spent as much time at home or resting or with my family as I could in order to still get ready for the game. So that means when I was at the field, it was like I needed to do this and this and this, right? So yeah, like two very different people. It didn't take me long to realize that I wasn't good enough to just be that guy, right? I wasn't Carlos Gonzalez, who was just like really amazing, and like I was just going to be naturally the best. It was like something I had deliberately had to cultivate a mentality that was going to produce results, and it wasn't, I wasn't the most naturally confident. I didn't have the ability to feel comfortable in every situation. It was something that I had to work on to help me perform at that level. And so it always approached the game maybe a little more serious than most. But I think, as you climb the ladder and you kind of feel like the stakes are getting greater as you get closer to the big leagues, I think it kind of helps you reach that pinnacle of focus.
Zach, Chuck is the rare athlete that I think is able to make the transition from a long and fruitful playing career. And I'm sure he looks back wistfully, but I think he also, just with how he's wired, his intellect, all the things he wants to do in life, all his interests, that he's able to move on. And it's a comfortable transition where it's a really difficult one for many athletes, especially those that were able to play a long time and have phenomenal success.
That's his whole life, right? All he's ever been doing is playing baseball, and all of a sudden it's gone. I had that experience at 23 years old, and certainly not at the level he did. I can't imagine what it's like another decade and a half later into your life. That's all he's done every single day of his entire life. And when it's gone, it is tough to move on. But it's cool that he's been able to settle into this role and stay here in Denver.
Our final interview is a guy that I have immense respect for. He's somebody that, is a big star, especially in covering baseball. He also covers hockey. He's a super bright guy. He's a great writer. He's one of the most affable people in the media that I know. And it's always good to catch up with Jon Morosi, Jon Paul Morosi, JP, if you will, and talk baseball. And our conversation was immediately following this fabulous World Series that Zach and I were commenting on earlier.
JP, I know we always want to put things in certain files, and we want to throw around superlatives. That World Series, though, was magical in many ways. How do you look at it now that it's been over for 48 hours?
Drew, first of all, thanks for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it. I look at it in two different ways. Number one, the sheer, just the beauty, the madness, the ups and downs. There were a number of things that happened in this World Series that you would say would never happen again, that you never would have expected them to happen. You even go back to Game 3 and what Bo Bichette thought was a walk and Varsho thought was a walk and some miscommunication. Who knows how that unravels in different ways and creates maybe an alternate universe, if you will. There were so many pivot points. The world got to know who Will Klein is. Not a lot of folks knew that when the World Series started. Unlikely heroes, some very likely heroes with the likes of Yamamoto. And I think, too, Game 7, any World Series that is truly a classic, I think, has to go 7 games. And then when you've got numerous iconic plays, the tying homer from Rojas, the go-ahead homer from Smith, the chance to score in the bases-loaded situation for the Jays, the way that the World Series ends with, as Joe Davis said very eloquently, the World Series could end on the next swing, either by a home run, by Toronto, or by a double play. Of course, we know what the result was. The Rojas play to get Kiner Falefa at home, the catch by Pages. I mean, you could just go down the list of moments that you never thought we would see, and yet we did. So I look at those just absolute, you no matter whether you're watching this game at home in Maine or in Hawaii or Japan or the Netherlands, you're jumping up and down because you just can't believe what you're seeing. So that's number one. The second part, Drew, is, and I'm lucky to be involved in our podcast through the Hall of Fame and XM Radio on the road to Cooperstown. And I often go back when I have the privilege of talking with Hall of Famers. You go back to moments like this, Drew, and say, okay, how many Hall of Famers were in this particular series at this particular time, or players or moments, managers who have a really historic claim on the game. One of my favorite series in this life to talk about is the 04 NLCS, not the ALCS, which was famous in its own right, but the NLCS that year was a historic series in its own right. Pujols and Roland and Edmonds and La Russa. And then on the Houston side, you had Berkman and Biggio and Bagwell and Clemens and Pettit. So you start, oh my gosh, and you're like 10 deep of significant people, figures in the game that you really care about. And I think, Drew, in this World Series, we'll feel the same way. When we're having this conversation 20 years from now, Lord willing, we'll go back and say, wow, Dave Roberts' Hall of Fame credentials got a lot stronger in that World Series. Will Smith's Hall of Fame credentials got a lot stronger in that World Series. The world got to know Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in a different way. Bo Bichette in a different way. Max Scherzer still going at age 41. We know that Betts a Hall of Famer. We know Ohtani's a Hall of Famer. We know Freeman's a Hall of Famer. We know Kershaw's a Hall of Famer. So you start going down the list and you're saying, oh my gosh, we saw something real with people that we care about in the game. Don Mattingly as the bench coach of the Blue Jays. I could go on. So Drew, for me, it's the two tracks. It's the absolute roller coaster. Can you believe what just happened? Emotion that we all had numerous times, especially in Game 3 and in Game 7, also in Game 6, also in Game 1. And then it's the overarching nature of this. When you revisit this World Series and we pull it back out 20 years from now for the 20-year anniversary in the retrospective, and they gather the people around, hopefully they're all in the deck chairs at the Oda Saga, and say, wow, that 2025 World Series was something. I think we're still going to feel that way 20 years from now.
Yeah, you did such a great job of encapsulating everything that took place. And I do think for it to be, in that pantheon of great World Series, you do need the characters or the great players of the era. And, you start with the Dodgers, their first 3 in the lineup, typically all Hall of Famers. Will Smith steps up. Dave Roberts has won 3 now. I mean, we all love Doc, right? That puts him probably on the front door. He's in, right? I go back also to that 18-inning affair. And one of the things that's intoxicating about baseball, first of all, the pitch clock has moved it along, and I don't want to go down that street. I think it's been marvelous, and kudos to Rob for getting that pushed across. But that 18-inning affair, depending on where you were taking it in, at least in our country, really late at night. And whether you're a baseball person like we are, or you're a casual observer, you couldn't turn away. You couldn't say, that's it. I want to put my head on the pillow, because you don't want to miss out.
It was iconic. And I think, Drew, as well, the viewership numbers to pull out even further and further. I just saw that the numbers that Sportsnet shared, I believe, if I'm quoting it correctly, 43% of Canada was watching Game 7 of the entire country. Okay, that is like, I think, bigger than a Super Bowl rating in terms of on a percentage basis. It's remarkable that realm in Canada used to be reserved for Olympic gold medal hockey game territory, right? The 72 Summit Series and Henderson scores. That's like a national moment. And so Canada felt that way. Japan also felt that way. So we can sort of look at the numbers and the Nielsen ratings, as you and I both know, they matter, but they tell part of the story. And I think the larger point, and I would challenge anyone to sort of fight me on this point, because it's almost impossible to argue. So I'm cleverly picking a point that's almost difficult or impossible to actually tangibly combat. But I really believe this, that more people are engaged and care about the Major League Baseball product around the world than ever before. Because you might have said, oh, yeah, well, look at what the ratings were for Carlton Fisk in 75. Okay, yeah, but I'm not sure that we had a strong Japanese audience at that time, or that almost half of our neighboring country was watching that game. And so when you consider the growth of the game, the business of the game, whether you're selling ads, streaming service, whether it's in the continental U.S. or whether it's in Canada, Japan, wherever it might be, it's a global marketplace. And I'm looking at this, to me, Drew, and saying, just anytime you do this multiple times a year, just look at the outfield signage at Dodger Stadium and ask yourself how many of those companies are based outside of the U.S. And you say, wow, the investment, the partnerships, the number of people that care about this game and Major League Baseball, in my view, has never been greater.
He's a guy that whenever I talk to, and you met him, I think for the first time at the winter meetings in Orlando, he's interesting. He knows everyone, and he's got, great takes on the sport as it sits right now, but also from a historical perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I met him, as you mentioned, for the first time at winter meetings. And then you hear other people talk about him at winter meetings, and you'll never hear anybody not say that this guy is not the nicest, kindest person out there. And he's also so bright. I think he knows 3 or 4 languages, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he can carry on conversations. I mean, he's fluent in several languages. I mean, that's how you get into Harvard. I mean, they're just taking any ball of wax and letting them walk in Cambridge. Yeah,
he was really interesting to meet. Obviously, been following his work since I was young, and especially in this day and age on social media, you're seeing what Jon Morosi has to say about baseball and hockey every single day. So it's cool to see him in person. It was awesome that you got him on right after that World Series as well, that he, of course, was covering.
Yeah, that's great. Zach, Happy New Year. Happy early New Year. Happy New Year to all the folks out there. We thank you very much for engaging on the podcast, typically each week throughout 25. And I think Marky told me we're at 330 shows now since we began in July of 2019, and we're going to try to keep it rolling into the future the best that we can. Zach, I love you, buddy. Good luck this coming year, and as I said, thanks for joining me on this year-end special.
Yeah, thanks for having me. The Avs just tipped off. We're tipped off. The puck dropped. We had to get on.
we got things to do, places to go. Happy New Year, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and enjoy your families.